Welcome, ghouls, ghoulettes, and guesties to GonstFM Off Air, the official podcast companion to 66.6 GonstFM, the internet radio station dedicated to the band Ghost and the wider Gonst community. I'm Papa X.
And I'm Uncle Ghoul.
And we are on the road to Skeletá. This is the Majesty of Meliora, because we are here to talk about the album Meliora, and where we last left off was with Papa II and Infestissima. And once again, we have a passing of the torch from one Papa to another Papa.
And to perhaps the fandom's favorite Papa.
I would dare say he is the fan favorite, like above all. And right now he's got a little stiff competition. And by the way, stiff pun fully intended on that one. Yeah, Papa III is probably the actual most popular Papa.
Absolutely. I mean, for so long, like how often do we hear people, still wanting him to come back and front the band out of any other Papa? And even at that time, like it's a kind of a crazy thing is that I don't know if any other Papa has been so, and captivating new fans too, right? It's not just people who are like, oh, I miss him. It's people who are like, I've never seen him. I would do anything to see him. And whenever you see an edit on TikTok or a meme or anything, it's probably Papa III. He is the Papa that people are obsessed with.
Yeah, and it's really not hard to see why, because I think when we were speaking about how in our last episode, how Papa II may be one of the most recognizable, if not the most actual recognizable Papa, because that was when the band was really starting to get some, motion and take off. I think with Papa III, the reason he is as popular as he is because he's got that real silliness to him that we would find in later iterations of Ghost, but he also still had the carryover of that dark brooding shit from the first two eras of Ghost. Mm-hmm.
I always tell people, and I always talk about Papa III, and I say that he had the best balance to me, where it is darkness and the comedy works really well because it's coming from a figure who looks imposing and, you can interpret as being really terrifying. But at the same time, he is absolutely hilarious, right? And in those jokes, you wouldn't expect them to come out of someone who looks like that. And so it works really well balance-wise. It's that horror comedy thing,
I think the same can be said for the album in question, Meliora, is I tell people all the time, especially people that are just getting into the band, I've actually had people that I know that are like, well, if I'm going to listen, where should I start? Everybody, I think, has their own entryway into the band. Mine was Prequel. That was my first full album introduction to this band. However, I do tell people, I think Meliora is probably the actual best entry point because it has a little something from the past and everything that the band has become known for since. And I feel like it is a perfect middle ground. Like the scope is bigger, obviously, on this album, and there's just as much of the darkness from Opus that are still kind of present in a few of the tracks. So I still feel like it's a good balance of an album.
It's a transitional album in a way because it feels like to me it is the ending of Ghost as we know it and literally concluding a trilogy, but at the same time concluding an era of the band where there was so much change. And I always say this, and people sometimes interpret this as a negative thing, but I mean it fully positive. After this album, Ghost became a different band. They had a rebirth. And it's kind of a goodbye to the old while also embracing the new at the same time. And so it's kind of has those elements that we probably haven't gotten back since then. But at the same time, you can see the start of the elements that would become the future of this album, and future albums that would come. And it's a very interesting album because you can see this kind of crossroads almost of that kind of darker, churchy sound and the kind of anthemic stuff that was going on later on.
And I mean, really, in the Latin translation, better things, and as the band says, the pursuit of something better, I think that really does all tie in very well as far as like our discussion and everything that will happen with this album, because to this day, Meliora is the only Grammy Award, the United States, I should say, is the only United States Grammy Award winning album and it was the best metal performance for Cerise.
Absolutely. And I think this album also grabs people in this era too, because it's also visually cohesive. There's such an identity to everything to where the sound matches the visuals pretty well. There is the saying of they look darker than they sound, but I don't know. I think this album has a really good identity to it to where the sound, you look at those guys and I can see them playing it. And I can see, all the costumes were phenomenal. Those, Jerry Constantine ghouls and, the start of those Majesty black robes and the suit. We got this more kind of lively Ghost in the shows that was building towards the arenas. The sound being polished and poppy, right? Of course, with, a pop producer working on this. And at the same time, great heavy riffs, everything that you kind of want from Ghost. That cohesion is so perfect to a level that I don't know if they've, we haven't seen the new era yet, but I don't know if anything really grips quite the same as being this just perfectly cohesive and unique and striking visually and sonically. It really is an album that is phenomenal that way.
Yeah, and it was great that you brought up the producer, Claus. This guy has worked with literally everybody you could think of in pop. Like, he's worked with Britney Spears, Kesha, Katy Perry, Swedish House Mafia, Madonna, Snoop Dogg, Charlie XCX. Like, the list literally goes on and on. And in talking with Ludwig way back in the beginning of this podcast, it was interesting to hear how his perspective was in recording this album, because lest we forget, the album prior to this one, he did not return for. He drummed on Opus, was absent for Infestissima, and then came back to play on this one and its subsequent follow-up, Prequel. And he was describing literally how much bigger the scope is on this. And he joked, he's like, more money, bigger everything, because it's true.
Yeah.
The band really did have a tonal shift too, because they started writing more guitar heavy like licks for this, and the sci-fi element that Tobias had talked about kind of coming into play is very prevalent. Obviously we'll get into the songs like in more detail, but while it's on my mind, the opening of Spirit it's really great synthesizer that's meant to mimic a theremin, and it's got that real old like science fiction radio broadcast kind of like noise and sound. Like, you're kind of being introduced to this new creepier sound, but it's also very grandiose at the same time,
which fits so well with the album cover, right? Where we have this kind of homage to it's Metropolis, right?
Yep.
Where it's this really kind of almost futuristic, but still there's this thing. This album gives me the vibes of futuristic yet old school. If you ever go to like weird comparison, but if you ever go to like Disney and you see Tomorrowland and it's like their version, 1950s version of what the future would look like, that's kind of the vibe I get on this album, which is like this old school silent film era classiness, but looking to the future in maybe an unrealistic but kind of hopeful way. Like the album title itself is, the pursuit of something better. Is kind of this like looking to the future for this where everything's going to be great. And it reflects in the sound a lot, I think, with these kind of more reverby and more effects driven wet guitar sounds,
Yeah. The drums are even that way as well. Like that you can hear more of the tonal quality of them on there. They're not too dry.
No, it's not that vintage dry sound. It's very dynamic, right?
Yeah. Everything sounds great on this one. They used a couple of Gibson SGs. They used a Gibson Les Paul from 1962. They used a Fender Telecaster, and they were using like 10 to 12 amplifiers from different companies on this. I mean, I
think also they used the Klon circuit on this a little bit too.
They sure did.
Yep, which they also used on Impera, and is personally a huge part of my guitar sound when I'm playing guitar. And I just love that sound. So it's that kind of little more modern, but also vintage drive you get.
The other thing too about like combining the vintage and modern is this one, they used a synth choral like emulator on here too, which further adds to the science fiction futuristic kind of thing. Cause it's like a no pun intended, actually, yeah, full pun intended on this one. It's like a Ghost in the Machine kind of, thing there. So I loved it though. And it was a while before this album grew on me in the way that it did, because you got to understand, like me coming into the band when I did, it was kind of like, oh shit, my ADHD is going to take over. Where the fuck do I start? What do I listen to next? Where am I going to go from here? Because it felt like I had to consume it all, at the same time. So whenever I decided I'm going to take the plunge, I went and just listened in sequential order. And getting into this one, I'd remembered, oh shit, I've heard Cerise. Oh shit, I've heard From the Pinnacle to the Pit in passing before I've deep dived into this thing. And, once I got out of that and I moved onward to Prequel and Impera, I had my albums that I really enjoyed, and Meliora wasn't one where I was like, this sucks, because nothing sucks in my opinion for this catalog of music. I think there's less like in a tier where you would rank your own personal stuff. Meliora sat kind of low for me for a hot minute, dude. And it's number 3 for me right now. It's number 3 because like we've talked about Infest and Opus. I love those two. And those two constantly switch to a number 1 spot back and forth for me. So I could technically say that Meliora is like my number 2 Ghost album. It's good. It's commercial, but it's not.
Yeah. I have conflicting thoughts sometimes because I love this album, and I think this album objectively might be the perfect Ghost album. I'm going to say that. I think objectively.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it's my favorite. I don't have the emotional pull to it sometimes that makes me come back. There are songs on it that make me come back to it, and I think it's a great experience. And this is not me saying it's bad at all or even anything negative. It's just as far as like if I'm going to sit and put on an album, it doesn't come in my first 2 spots.
I think you put that into words better than I ever could have, like, because that's legitimately like what I was thinking. That made
sense.
Yeah.
It's one of those albums where it's like objectively, I think it is almost perfect. I think it is like it really reflects Ghost, and it's a perfect spooky pop rock, metal, everything you want. But at the same time, it's just for whatever reason, I don't come back to it as much as, and part of it might be that there's a lot of songs on it that are overplayed for me. Just from going to rituals and watching rituals and seeing everything. And most of the set list now has been comprised of Meliora stuff for a long time. I've heard Cerise love that song, but it's one song that I need to sometimes take a break from and then come back to because I hear it so many times that it just becomes like the magic gets lost a little bit,
Yeah.
As great as it is. I need to find that appreciation again.
For sure, man. And Cerise is like the sad but true of Ghost's catalog.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that very positively in terms of the riffs are similar, the stomping like drive of it. So I get the fucking appeal. You know what I mean? That's me saying like I understand the appeal of Cerise. It's a great goddamn song, but I'm the same way. Like it doesn't pull me in like emotionally, like you were just saying, because like I have like my emotional ties to a couple of other albums. However, when I do, like I told you this morning, I listened to it like front to back a few times. It's a great listen front to back. It's a great listening experience. And I feel like, with most records, I have to hear front to back. If it's an album I truly love, there's no skips on it. Like I listen to it front to back. This one is one, and I might piss some people off with this one. This is one that I can pull certain tracks from and just listen to it and be okay.
I'm the same way. And it's not because I don't like the whole album. Really, because this is one album that I really don't have many skips on personally. It's just that it's almost, this might piss people off too. It's almost so hyped up that it almost makes me write it off. Not because it's like, I want to be different, but because I'm constantly hearing about it to where it's like, it doesn't feel like, I forgot about this album. I'm going to go smash it out. It's like, I feel like I'm always listening to it because I'm always hearing the songs. And most of the songs off of this album are played live. And if I'm going to listen to this album, or I'm going to pull songs from this album, I'm going to pull the songs that aren't constantly played live. And then I feel like I've heard the whole album recently because I've heard, look at the set list now. How many of those songs are still played every single show?
7. So, if you count the if you count a couple of the instrumentals, 7.
7 of them. So that leaves just a couple of tracks that are already on my playlist that I'm going to listen to. So sitting down and listening to it, as much as I love this album, I am like, even right now, I'm in a part where I probably can't listen to Cerise right now. Like I could listen to it, be fine. But right now I'm probably going to listen to the Right Here, Right Now version because I've heard it so many times, and it's not that it gets old. It's just that I've heard it so many times that it's like, I'd rather listen to something I haven't listened to so much.
I guess if you want to get into like breakdown song by song properly here,
and we're starting off with one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, dude.
Whole catalog.
Yeah, Spirit. And the cool part about this album is that it is a break from the norm where this album does not start with an instrumental. It starts with a fucking song, but it feels like an instrumental because it's a long one. It's like a little over 5 minutes, and the beginning you're thinking like, okay, this is an instrumental, but when this is my favorite part about this song is hearing Ludwig start keeping the time, like using his foot pedal on the hi-hat to like count. Yeah. And that real cool tempo that they use, because there's like some polyrhythm shit going on. And, there's a couple of time signatures that are clashing in a good way with each other, like in that beginning spot. And it's so well done. And it's a good build, man. The tom work and the chugging guitar riff. God, man.
It's so cinematic. It starts off and it feels like you could see the Universal Pictures logo come up on like an old Universal monster movie. Like just that spooky, like mad scientist almost vibe. And then the guitar, and then, the drums and the hats and everything, and the toms come in, that groove, and it builds and builds and builds and builds. It is like an auditory experience like nothing else. It gets you so pumped.
Yeah, it is kind of like Aural Frankenstein because of the theremin synth kind of sound where it's like, oh shit, here comes the lightning. Oh fuck, it's alive. There's the drums. You know what I mean? Yep.
And it's like you can see like almost like a credit sequence happening, Like the album, like those movies. It's like it's so cinematic, like a silent film, right? Like, it's so huge and picturesque, and it instantly tells you this album is going to be huge. The previous album starts off huge, right? Emphasis starts huge, but it's kind of huge in a different way, to where it's like you can tell there's a level up with just the like almost prog elements of how progressive and different parts and stuff that we're getting here. Like you mentioned, the polyrhythms and all of that, as opposed to Emphasis was a little more straightforward. It's just a driving beat, some choruses and chords. This is already, by the time the vocals start, you've had so many changes happen.
And I think one of my favorite parts about listening to this, especially like nowadays, is like if you pull up your Apple like account or Spotify or whatever, they have like the visualizer version of the album covers now, where they're moving and like stuff's changing about it. So looking at it and seeing like the spotlights, from the back, and like seeing the album kind of move and swirl, and it's a whole experience, especially listening to Spirit opening this record, which is, if I am not mistaken, it is one of the tracks that Martin Persner was having a hand in, because I think he had a hand in like probably half this album.
I feel like sometimes we don't talk about how much of his influence, I think, is in the Ghost sound. Not to take away from anyone else, but like we talk about co-writers, and there's certainly co-writers on later albums and stuff. But if you listen to the stuff from his projects, and even just the way the guitar feels, there's absolutely his handprint is on this album, and his way of creating things and just the way things are constructed. That this might sound sacrilege, but Martin Persner and Tobias Forge are like the modern day satanic Lennon and McCartney.
100%.
They were a duo that I think created such magic, because you can tell who did what and how they almost were a little bit different in their approach, but also the same at the same time. And when they worked together, it was this one super defined sound that after his exit has not fully come back in the same way. Not to say that it's not good. I know that that's, can be a sore subject, but there is certainly a sound that was undeniably missing, for better or for worse, afterwards. Yeah. And you can hear it.
They are a great duo. When they put their ideas together, it's fun, because you can hear the stuff that like, oh, that's Tobias. Or no, that's Martin. Like we were talking about string picking that is prevalent, especially in the bonus edition version with Zenith,
which is a song that, like, if anyone's listened to MCC, Magna Carta Cartel, you can hear that could have been a song on one of those records. Even listening to any of those songs, it's like, oh yeah, that's a very thing, which we talked about on the last bonus track,
the Mantra Mori.
Yes. I was double checking if that was a bonus track in my head, because I was like, is that like we were talking before? I always assume that's on the album. I was like, that is a bonus track, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like you can hear for sure that element of that guitar playing that really does sound and feel like, yeah, that's Martin.
And getting to the end of Spirit, like having both of these ideas from Tobias and Martin, like crescendo, quite literally crescendo at the end of this song.
It goes into that galloping, and then it gets to that huge ending where it's that big theatrical, progressive, proggy section, which is phenomenal.
I love it so much.
So good.
Yeah. And then it leads right into from the pinnacle to the pit. And I will pose this question to you. And as I'm posing this question to you, anybody out there that is listening to this podcast episode, like right now, as I'm asking this question, don't think about it. Just go leave it in the comments below. Which opening bass riff goes harder, Conclave Candio or from the pinnacle to the pit?
Ooh.
Yeah, I know.
Possible question. Conclave is one of my favorite Ghost songs of all time, but I feel like I have to give it to Pinnacle, and I'm going to tell you why. It's because hearing Pinnacle live for the first time that I remember was on the Black to the Future tour, and it was early in the set. I don't remember. You probably know better than I do. Was it second song or like third? It was pretty early in the set.
Pinnacle?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think they were opening with it, right? They were opening with Spirit.
On the Black to the Future tour, yeah, it was like they opened with Spirit, and then they would jump in it from Pinnacle to the Pit. Like that's
in order. And I always think of two things with Pinnacle: that and Ceremony and Devotion, or that whole Pope Star tour, that drum fill out of Square Hammer right into that bass line.
Yes,
and I think of that every time, and I just always get goosebumps. So for that reason, Pinnacle, which isn't really fair to compare it to just like the live arrangement stuff, but that bass line has always been such a good transitional piece to where it's instantly like, oh my God,
Yeah.
So I have to give it to Pinnacle for that reason.
Yeah. I'll tell you my reasoning too. So I also feel like Pinnacle is I wouldn't say superior, but it's the preferred bass opening for me. And it is because of what immediately follows, and also the fact that if you look at Conclave Candio, the opening bass riff, you could have just as much played that on a guitar to open it like that. And in my opinion, it wouldn't have made a difference. However, from the Pinnacle to the Pit, that is a bass opener. That is a bass driven opening that, sure, you could play that on a guitar like with a riff, but it doesn't sound as cool if it's just like that real overdriven bass guitar.
I agree. And you can literally see that because the guitar does play the bass riff, in the verses.
Yep.
And it's not as cool, right?
No.
As that low end with that drive. But I love it because, it is kind of a spiritual successor in a way to Conclave Candio, where it does that, starts with the bass riff, then everything kind of comes in playing that same riff, and then it cuts back out to the bass riff. It's kind of like an updated version, It's like it is kind of like a sequel in a way, it feels like, and it works so well.
Oh, 1,000%.
And this song has one of my favorite moments ever in a Ghost song, which is that tapping guitar part on the choruses, and when it cuts out to just the drums and that tapping guitar part.
Yes.
That's one of my favorite moments ever in a Ghost song that never, ever, ever gets old for me.
Yeah, it's very, very epic. That's a great bridge piece. Like it may be one of the top 3 bridge pieces in Ghost's catalog.
And it's interesting too, because it's like, when I first heard this album, I always assumed that was keyboard. Like I thought that was a synth because it's just the way the guitar sounds and everything, and how synth heavy this album is. And then when I saw them live, and I was like, oh, that's a tap part on a guitar. And then figuring it out when I got home, was just like, it's one of those things that almost reminds me of like, hearing Van Halen and people being like, oh, how, back in the day, how was that done?
Right.
It's like, you don't really feel that much for a guitar, but I was like, it's a really unique sound and it's really cool.
I'm happy you brought Van Halen up, man. That was like, I'm saying that because, like, that was literally my introduction to rock music whenever I was a kid.
Yeah.
I was 2 years old, and I remember my dad's beat up ass old blue Dodge truck with the 1984 cassette tape. And that I played the shit out of that. And so I think the tapping, I am coming full circle with this, I promise. Like, I think the tapping, on guitar that Eddie Van Halen did, really, it made me pay more attention to more than just riffage. I was like, okay, so this can be done. And
because it's so melodic. Right? It's a melodic kind of thing where and not to get too far off, but Eddie approached guitar like everything was a orchestral piece, a piece of music. And there's that vibe in Pinnacle of like, once that comes in, that could be, if you put that on another instrument, it could be in a like Beethoven piece or something. It's a beautiful little melody that is strange, And I saw once discussing this album, actually, it was the YouTuber Ben Eller, if anyone's familiar with him, Uncle Ben. He's actually filling in Mastodon now. Or I don't know if he's filling in or he's going to be the new guitar player. But he did a series on Meliora and breaking down like what makes them sound evil and stuff. And he mentioned that you could tell that Tobias wasn't a traditional guitar player and that he writes things in ways that like most guitar players wouldn't play, which gives unique phrasing. And he like pointed to that as like an example of that and that intro solo in Pinnacle, how it kind of jumps around. It's almost like someone who hears something in his head and then figures it out on guitar afterwards, as opposed to figuring it out in the more typical scale way. And it just kind of has a unique feel to it.
That's exactly how I fucking write too. I think about it and it has to be how it sounds in my head. So, it's great.
But it is interesting because if you listen to that opening riff in Pinnacle, that do, it's very strange. Like, you know, if you know your theory, it's not that strange, but it's still like almost, it gives it that kind of futuristic spooky vibe.
Yeah.
Is because it's like even playing it jumps around kind of erratically. Like it was just notes put together that sounded nice, but it's hard to play because it's kind of weird. You know, they're not just next to each other.
Let's take a potential keyboard riff and just throw it on this guitar. How about it? Because that's the vibe I got.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And that's such a cool thing. And this song is a great example of it.
Yeah, it's definitely a fucking rockin' tune, as Papa 4 would say. It's a rockin' tune.
Rockin' tune.
It's a rockin' tune. Then we go into, out of Pinnacle of the Pit, we go into Cerise, which it's wild because like the instrumental Spoxonot that follows it, this all together was originally composed as an instrumental. Like Cerise never had lyrics in the beginning whenever they were putting this together. And that's hard for me to imagine. Yeah. That this whole thing was going to be like almost like an over 7-minute long instrumental. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about it without lyrics, and it doesn't make sense to be an instrumental like at all.
No, it doesn't. And I'd be curious what that sounded like. But this song, I think it's because it's so vocal driven, specifically Cerise, because it really like, let's be real. The moment that I think people get drawn onto of this song is that chorus, because it's one of the most beautiful choruses probably ever written, and also in a Ghost song. And it's just, it kind of hits you out of nowhere the first time you hear it. Like, oh, okay, we're going from these chugging, you know, heavy, slow pounding, driving riffs to this beautiful just chorus and vocals with beautiful harmonies. And it's this delicateness in this darkness. And so I think that for that, like I can't imagine that instrumental, you know?
Same. And I think lyrically also, for all the stuff we said about Cerise earlier, we are coming back around to throw all of the positive things about this at you, where lyrically speaking and being balanced with what you just mentioned, there being a real heaviness and then a real beauty to it. The lyrical content is probably the most gut punching to your Catholic guilt.
And it's a song that on the surface, of course, right, sounds so pretty and beautiful and like a love song. But there's this, not to make a awful pun, but there's a darkness at the heart of my love.
It's true. Like, yeah, because that song is
the
all
only way I can describe it is that there's this darkness to it.
Yeah.
It's fake and hollow, but it doesn't feel that way at first. And then you think more about it and you're like, ugh, once you've come away from it, you know, it's like really interesting, which is a juxtaposition to the live shows where it's this delicate moment between Papa and a young lady in the crowd that, you know, is so coveted. But lyrically, in the context of the album, it's such a manipulation type of lyric.
It's funny that you did bring up Darkness at the Heart of My Love, because like that is also a song that is pretty much almost the exact same scenario in a way, but just spun a little differently.
Well, and it's also can be interpreted in some ways as, you know, of course, a religious leader, but it can also be interpreted as the devil, right? Because in so many literatures and folktales and, you know, stories, the devil comes to you in those times of, I can be there for you, I can help you, I understand you, all for it to, you know, be, you know, in traditional tales, a ruse, you know? And it's that kind of manipulation thing, that the greatest deceiver, right? which Ghost talks about, I think, in their songs a lot, which is this kind of like love song or manipulation posed as a love song, right?
Yeah, because I think we're experiencing that with Satanized right now.
Satanized Griftwood is another one that goes kind of there a little bit. There's a little less on the nose, but there's a lot of songs in the catalog to where it's this kind of like, you know, love song, but it's, you think on the surface, but it isn't, you know, which is just kind of, as you mentioned, the Catholic guilt. That's how it is it's, oh, they understand me, they accept me, they have me, they got my back, they take care of me, they'll raise funds for me, they'll give, you know, housing or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, does that mean anything if it's, where's that coming from, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm the way I am. Like, you know, people that know me, that listen to this, that know me personally, like you, and, you know, and a handful of other people, it's like, dude, that is the exact reason why I am not a religious person, like, at all.
And neither am I. And I have my own stories and my own things that I've been through. Like, I had one day where it just really was like, light switch was like, no, I can see through this bullshit.
Same.
You know? And it's just like, and it's why I'm so, not jaded, but grossed out. I get icked out by that whole thing. And people who prey on people like that, because it's preying on people. And this song, every time I feel it, I hear it, I can feel it.
Me too. And I know that's why a lot of people get super emotional, like when this song does come on. Transitioning out of that into Spoxonaut, which the melody of Spoxonaut comes back in Ashes on Prequel. So that's a little, I know a lot of people listening to this do know that, but for those of you that don't,
it's interesting too, because it's how we also knew ahead of time that Rats was going to come out, or that Rats existed, was because there was that interview at some point where he had mentioned, like, yes, in this song, this melody we reuse on a song called Rats that you'll hear in the future. So once we kind of knew that the new album was coming out and we knew there was a music video being filmed, we knew it was Rats, because Rats was the one song they had been talking about, which they don't really do as much. That was one kind of rare instance where, like, you could see how far ahead they planned, because Rats was mentioned, I want to say, and someone can fact check this, but I want to say by like 2017, it was mentioned in an interview somewhere out there that Rats existed.
And just the beauty of this song, it's a short one. It's like less than a minute, but I mean, leading into He Is, which is the midway point of the album, and the ballad. It is the ballad, I think, like more so. Cerise is more of a rock, like heavier kind of feel, but like
power ballad type. Yeah.
But He Is, I think, is like the emotional high point ballad. And it's a great song. It is the song on this album that I think I listen to the least. And it's like, it's good objectively, but it doesn't grip me in the way that a lot of others do. But I see what they did lyrically here with it, where, you know, I've heard so many people that have never listened to this band before. They're like, oh man, that's a really great praise song. And I'm like, it's not in the way that you think it is. And that is the cleverest fucking disguise.
Yeah. And I know, like, my wife doesn't like this song because it feels too much like a praise song. Even though lyrically it isn't, it just feels that way. And it definitely has this vibe to it where, for me, that's one of the coolest things about it. And I love that. But I do think that it is a song that, like, if you're not paying attention, you're just driving in the car, you'll think it's a Christian worship song. And I remember there was an instance where, like, a Christian church played it because they thought it was a song for Jesus. And it was like a big moment there. But it's one of those songs where it's like, it is a beautiful song. It's a greatly constructed song. Mm-hmm. It works great live. It's phenomenal. But similarly to you, it is a song to where it's like, it's kind of a slow point on the album a little bit. So I don't revisit it as much. It's also a song that is one that everyone will always tell you to listen to when you're discovering the band. It is one of those songs that is huge in the music video and everything. Yeah. And so it is a song that for me is overplayed. And so for that reason too, I sometimes don't revisit it, but sometimes I do revisit it, especially when I hear it live and I'm just like, that's a great sing-along song.
It is. And it's a good crowd involvement one. You know, it's one of Ghost's most accessible songs.
Yeah. And it has one moment in it that I will say I really do love. I love a couple of things. And a lot of it is drum wise. I love that drum fill leading into the second verse and just how everything kind of picks up a little bit there. and we're getting into that. It feels a little more full after that first chorus.
Yeah, the more straightforward.
And I really and it's just, it really starts driving, and that bass that's kind of like moving between those root notes. The kind of rhythmic thing it does every time we have that and we have that kind of hit where it kind of the bass surges. It's just it hits really nice there, and it does a great job of, again, like, to their praise, it sounds like a elevation worship song, like something you could walk into any mega church and hear that song, and then you listen to the lyrics and it's like, oh, okay, I see what you're going on.
Right. A lot of people out there listening may not know this, but this was actually written and attempted recording-wise around Infestissimum. They were trying to put this on Infestissimum at first, and I just cannot picture it fitting on that album.
I can't either. This is one that they've been kicking around for a while. And it's interesting because thinking of when Infestissimum was recorded, that's Opus era. That's recorded during the Opus era. So can you imagine like a scenario in where the band, because sometimes I feel like the band looks so different and is such a different band, even on this album, even on the second album than they were on the first album. And it's like, I can't imagine the band like, that looked like, they're gritty, traveling in a bus, Papa One, the dark robes and everything, being like, oh yeah, we're working on our next album. And one of the songs is He Is.
That's like, you and I had this discussion, dude. Oh God, forever ago. How we were talking about we would never want to see like Papa 2 singing fucking Dance Macabre. That's kind of like the comparison.
I remember talking about that. Yeah. Every Papa, there are some songs that work, but Ghost is a band that moves forward, not backwards. So you can't have, Papa 1 singing He Is, but you can have Cornucopia or Papa 3 singing Ritual, like it works in that way to where they all build upon each other, but you can't go backwards. You can't have Papa One singing Future is a Foreign Land, or Satanized even, It's like there might be elements, but they move so forward and it doesn't work because there's a vibe to each one. Not to get too far off, but each Papa is built for the era and the arena they're in. They're a product of their environment. And I'll throw this hot take out here now. It's why I don't want any of the past Papas to come back, is because they work well in that era, but you can't throw them into this new environment. You couldn't throw Papa One into an arena.
Yeah, and that's the very magic of Ghost in essence, honestly, where like every Papa that supersedes the one before, it's a tribute. If you really want to think about it, Ghost is a band that is very current, and they have a new Papa with almost every record that comes out, but every new Papa, quote, air quote, pays tribute to past Papas by singing their songs, and it works in that
doing
fashion.
Their gimmicks, right? How many times we're probably going to see Perpetua, Papa 5, singing Conclavi and swinging that thurible, which is something that was laid down by Papa 1, right? It is all tributes to that is their thing. Every Papa puts their thing into the thing, right? Whether it's, Papa 3 was the first one to start really wearing suits on stage. Now everyone has a casual suit, right? It's all these things. You bring something new, and then the next one builds upon that idea and pays tribute back to the one who brought something special to the band.
Yep.
They all bring their own unique thing, and then from there on out, it's something you can't imagine the shows without.
Yeah, and I think this next song is going to be one of those things because ever since Mummy Dust has come into the fray, man, look, what a fucking banger. Dude, it's almost one of those songs where it's like, you don't want to see it leave the set list because, like, I think every Papa has deserved having a mummy buck, with their face on it. Mm-hmm. But I'm very curious to see if this song, which I hope it does, makes it onto this next era. It's the heaviest. It's the heaviest fucking song on this album by far.
I don't know.
I mean, like, as far as riffs go, like and vocals and rips and vocals, like this is like repugnant era, like Tobias vocals. And I don't think that he had done anything like this gruff up into this point. So,
not with Ghost. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, of course you have a couple moments, like maybe the growls and Ritual get close, but even then, it's not to this level. And this song, it's in a low drop tuning, right? Even lower than how they normally tune. It is just a heavy, heavy metal song. I know some people probably get mad at that. They're not metal, as I say that, but it is a heavy song. And it's a great song with it's so interesting because there's so many instrumental elements that you wouldn't expect in it, like the guitar, right, live, and the synth, and just also just the choruses and just the amount of like key stabs that go in this over this heavy riff. It's auditory bliss.
There's not a whole lot else to really like to say with this song. I feel like it's such a meat and potatoes fucking thing, you know? Like, and then like the guitar is 100% like the garnish on it. Like that is the part we all come for, really, if you think about it.
But other than that, it's chugging. It's a chugging riff. It's a driving drum beat, and it's a simple meat and potatoes, old school throwback metal song.
You can circle pit to this song.
You can, and I've seen people do it. I know people always talk about how like there's no moshing at ghost shows. I always like to tell people, just to be safe, prepare for that to be a possibility, because you never know who's in the crowd, and like it's gotten harder with arenas to stop that. But I've certainly seen pits. I can count on more than one hand the amount of times I've seen a pit during Mummy Dust break out in the back of an arena or, you know, a smaller venue. It's just one of those songs, especially if they're touring with a heavier opener band, you know, and their fans stick around
because they're waiting for their moment.
They're waiting for their moment, and it happens. Like when they toured with Mastodon, I saw a couple, and even when they toured with Volbeat, there was a pit during Mummy Dust at the show I was at. I
just picture, because we were talking about the try not to headbang challenge on the last episode with Majesty.
Yeah,
and you were like, yeah, just bring this to like your uncle or whatever who was in a Pantera back in the 80s or whatever. I could just picture some dude that is from like that era that thinks Ghost is the most pussy rock band ever, and then this song comes on. Oh fuck yeah, brother!
I had a friend who saw them open for Iron Maiden, and he is not a Ghost fan. He is one of those people who believes, he listens to like heavy metal, and he's like, yeah, it's not for me. I was like, what'd you think of Ghost? And I was like, oh, I went to get beer during their set. And then he was like, oh yeah, but that song Mummy Dust was pretty good. He was like, I came back for that one.
He's at the fucking beer stand. He's been waiting for probably 25 minutes to get a $20 beer. He's like, we'll give a fucking good buzz here. And then he hears Mummy Dust, and he's like next in line, and he says, fuck it. And he drops everything right there and runs back into fucking Circle Pit. And then he has to get back in line for the beer. But he's sitting.
That's how I imagined it being, because he just had no interest in their set. And then I guess that riff started, and he was like, oh, hold on. Like,
yeah, he runs up there
with this one.
Yeah, he cranks out a fucking Circle Pit thing, and then he comes back and gets in line for his fucking beer, and he's like 60 people deep in the back of the line. It was worth it, you know?
Yeah. And then he still thinks that Ghost aren't metal afterwards. It's a funny thing. Well, it's really funny because this friend, and like, I love this guy. We played in bands together for years, but he went to see them again on Impera came out, and I think to some degree it won him over because he was like, yeah, I actually really like their newer stuff, which is really funny because like, I feel like most people say the opposite, but it was like, that was the thing that like, I don't think he ever just gave them a chance, you know?
Yeah. God, what a great song, dude. And we're going into the seventh track on here. This is my actual favorite song on this album, Majesty. I think Majesty deserves to get back on the fucking set list on this tour. And I mean, there's a damn reason this episode is titled The Majesty of Meliora. It's such a fucking epic song. It's I mean the album art, the single art with King Kong on the motherfucker, dude. Holy shit. It's the King Kong Terzo. It's kind of funny looking.
This song is phenomenal. It is great. And I'm just going to voice my grievance here real quick. This song, when I saw them in 2018 on the Pale Tour Named Death, no one in my section at least knew the song. They played this song, and Papa asked the crowd to sing, and it was just people looking at each other. So I'm going to make a plea right now that if you've not listened to Majesty, listen to Majesty. This is one of the best Ghost songs. It's my wife's favorite Ghost song. It's one of my favorite. It's in my top 5. It is my favorite. I agree. My favorite on this album. It is an exceptional song. That opening riff is so dirty. And then that dirty kind of organ comes in along with it. And just that bell, the ride cymbal, right? It's slow and groovy and doomy, but also soulful and funky, and this cool drum beat, and it's heavy and chuggy, and it's got great vocals, and awesome lyrics. It's like, I can't praise this song enough.
And the trash can roll out on the drums at the end. Holy shit, yes.
Oh my God. It ends like, you could tell there's energy because it ends like a live song. Also, that line, Your Infernal Majesty, right? With those, it's almost like a song about Papa, right? Like lyrically in some ways, but also like there's some great lines that describe things as such. I love songs that describe things with contempt.
Same.
There's like kind of, right, like any of that type of thing where it's like creative language for contempt. And this song has so much of it. It's so good. It's just, I can't praise it enough. Like, this is easily a 10 out of 10 song.
Oh, for sure, dude. And I was getting to the opening riff with you earlier. Dude, that opening guitar riff is so AC/DC, it's not even funny.
Yeah. It's also like kind of Deep Purple-y. It's that 70s kind of like.
That was what I was going to ask you. If you thought like when the organ kicks in, that's Deep Purple right there. Like that kind of is.
And Uriah Heep.
Yes. God, dude, I haven't fucking talked about that band with anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my God. I
love
band.
That. What a great band that has really inspired Ghost. And if you listen to a lot of songs, you can hear even that same kind of like galloping thing, that like waltzy thing, and those organs, and that there's so much. Deep Purple and also Scorpions is another one that inspired Ghost a lot, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that people should listen to if you haven't. So especially the song In Trance could be a Ghost song, and Ghost should cover that. But yeah, like there's a real Deep Purple, also Black Sabbath, right? When they had their kind of more bluesy driven songs,
yes.
And there is that kind of bluesy, almost like Manfred Mann too. Like there's like a Manfred Mann Earth Band, right? That kind of like soulful 70s rock thing, which is like less the AOR 70s and more the kind of proggy 70s stuff that was going on.
Yeah. Damn.
It's really cool.
I think that's why this song is my favorite on this album. It's such a multi-layered piece, man.
This album as a whole, I haven't really mentioned it, but it's a very proggy album. It's very 70s prog rock, kind of down to the riffs, and there's some weird time signature stuff and some off feels and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And this song is one of those ones too, where it's just like the riff and the way it's composed feels like it's kind of takes a while to get through it, but it builds anticipation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And this is another Persner co-penned song.
Mm-hmm. And I think you can absolutely tell.
Yeah, it's very prevalent. I feel like in the pre-chorus, especially, it's very prevalent.
Absolutely. And that chorus is cool because rhythmically it's really interesting, right? Like, I know we can both appreciate that as drummers, but it's not a straight ahead chorus, Like there's so many choruses where it's like, this is not a square hammer. This is not, and maybe that's why it's not sometimes appreciated as much. And maybe it wasn't as catchy, even though I think it's insanely catchy.
Yeah.
But it's not like a 4 on the floor, straightforward chorus. This is a chorus that's proggy and moving and interesting, and that's why it grips me, man. And it's such a cool groove.
Yeah. Yeah, that dun 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 dun. Yeah, that's such a fuck. Goddamn, I could. It's crazy. I could spend like probably an hour talking about that just to breaking it down.
Just the song, yeah. I have to like stop myself from just going because it's like I probably have in the past.
Yeah,
talked about just like between my wife and I just talking about Majesty, And
then to come out of Majesty into Devil Church, which I think the instrumental pieces on this album serve their purpose, because if you take away Spoxanaut and Devil Church, there's only 8 songs in total. And
not to talk shit on an upcoming album, but there is a couple instrumental tracks on like Impera to where they didn't need to be their own standalone songs in my mind. Like Bite of Passage could have been part of Respite.
Yep.
100%. This is not the case, to where I feel like this deserves its own standalone. It's not, almost feels like it's filling out something to have that extra track listing there. You could have made this an 8-track album, but it's added by having this composition. When I say they serve their purpose, like instrumentally speaking, the placement of each one on this is really good, because you got 3 songs, then an instrumental, then 3 songs, and then an instrumental. Mm-hmm. They kind of follow that pattern on Prequel as well. Devil Church, I mean, there's not really much else to say about it. It literally is like a church song, but evil. But I love the lead into Absolution, which that's another track I think is a high point on Meliora. Absolution also does a really interesting job of bridging a gap to me of like where Ghost is going to go in the future. which is slightly more straightforward, little more poppy, vocal driven, almost like Cheap Trick, kind of like, not to say power pop, but like pop rock, while also keeping heavy riffs. It's got 1 foot in the past and 1 foot firmly footed in the future. And that's what's so cool about it, is that you could put Absolution, I think, on some of the later albums and it would work really well. But also you could put it on the older albums and it would work really well too.
Yeah.
It's a really kind of interesting song in that way.
It's wild that it even works that way. Like, I literally just stared off, like, people who can't see this because, like, it's an audio fucking platform, but I literally just stared off and thought about that for a hot second. I was like, man, that's so true. It's so true.
Yeah, and it's got that cool, really, we talk about the futuristic and kind of like vibes, that bridge section, almost, I guess, bridge or B section, right? With the tom fills and the you will cry, and, you know, that whole, which is a huge live moment, of course, later on, but it's such a, like, huge, like, almost Genesis or, like, Styx.
That's it, because the vibe I get is actually that, but if you listen to it with, and this is the fun part about technology, especially nowadays, like, because like we have shit called spatial audio, you know, like so I love listening to this one now, especially because we're getting all of the, like, the panning, like the stereo panning effects that we were supposed to, like, really, you know, hear, that you don't get on mono track. Like, if you listen to this the way it's intended, like that part where the you will cry, like the echoes and the delays on that vocal line are bouncing all over in headphones, it's like, it's literally swirling you, and it's such a fucking intoxicating moment in that song.
It is. It's like, and also like everything, the drums are whizzing past your head. Everything is, these synths are like bouncing around. It's like, if you think of, in, you know, I mentioned like a Mad Scientist Lair before, it's like an experiment gone wrong. Everything is going everywhere. It's just like this pew, 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 just craziness, you know? And it's so sick for that. And then it's just this perfect theatrical, huge 70s rock moment where you can just like feel like there's a choreographed moment of something, you know, like you think back to like Rush almost, right? Like these big, huge passages with these big tom fills and dramatics and like gravitas to rock music. Right?
This is screaming 2112 at my face right now.
Yeah.
That's my favorite Rush album.
and again, right? Very proggy, this song, this album, and very like experimental and very like big. But not even big sonically, but in the way of compositionally, right? Where it's just huge space driven, boom, boom, boom. You know, it just feels huge. It works so well.
It's a good penultimate track. Getting into the closer of the album, Deus in Absentia, talk about very well arranged. It is the most different sounding song on this album, and it's one of the most different sounding songs, I think, in Ghost's catalog, in terms of how it opens, the drum stabs, like where it goes, but, and not in a bad way, it is the all too familiar ending. And we talked about how each Ghost album has like the big beginning, the peak in the center of the album, and then like the slow come down and the trail off at the end.
Yeah. They all kind of die out. And I don't mean that as a negative way. It's like they literally kind of die out.
I think this one is the most dramatic because, like, Prekel's ending we'll get to when we talk about that album, but like Prekel's ending is very nuanced. It's like you kind of expect how it's ending. Impera just kind of fades out, like quite literally fades out. Genesis from Opus slows down like into an acoustic outro. Infestissumam, you know, we talked about Monster's Clock, how that, I think
and then just this,
Yeah, I think there is a slight, and I don't know if this was intentional or not. Maybe when they were writing this album, they were like, well, we need to have a closer that is kind of comparable to Monster's Clock. I feel like Deus in Absentia is probably the song in Ghost catalog that is the most similar in terms of ending. Like the back half of the song ending is the most similar to Monster's Clock.
It really is, and it gives a very similar vibe and purpose on the album. It's maybe a little, as Popular would say, maybe a little predictable, but in a good way. You know, he would famously say before Monster's Clock, we always end with the same song, and maybe it's a little predictable, maybe it's a little boring, but people like it, right? And everyone cheers. No. That's how I feel about this. Maybe it is predictable that they would end with a song that ends very similarly and has a similar vibe, but this song is too lush and beautiful to say is just a Monsters Clock clone, because it isn't.
Right.
You know? And it has, if I can draw attention to it, one of the most beautiful lines and moments in a Ghost song for me, which is that part where he sings, "All of your imaginations are running down your face."
Yeah.
And it also has that guitar part, which I just want to point out, that specific like interval on guitar and that riff comes back in Satanized, if no one's caught that. But it's the same exact riff right at the end of that last chorus. It comes back, and he does that a lot. It's, what is it? Root, fourth, and then I don't know. I just like got my guitar, but but like if you don't play guitar, you know what I'm talking about. It comes back in a couple of songs, but it follows those chord changes, and it's one of those moments where it's like so pretty. Just, it's such a beautiful guitar part with those vocals, but it also is so mournful and longing and sad.
Yeah, that's the vibe I get after the band quits playing and then the choral arrangement kicks in. It is very mournful. It is very haunting. And knowing what this album goes into, like if you just listened to Opus and then Infestissimum and then Meliora and then Prequel and then Impera, and you don't take your side quests at the EPs that are in between these records, I love the fact that like it kind of ends in a way where you're like, fuck, where do they go from here? You know, like if you're listening to these albums and you're like, you just kind of want an audible story. You don't need like an actual story, but like the music itself, you know, tells like its own story. Like, where do they go from here? You know what I mean? Because it's such a high point in the band's catalog at this point. This is like obviously in the moment that is released, you know, we didn't know what was coming next. It's such a high point.
I always advise people, and this might be a hot take in its own right, to listen to the standard edition of this album first and not the deluxe edition. Because I know from experience, a lot of, because I had a Discord server, a lot of people have heard this album and only heard the deluxe edition and counted Popestar, the EP, as part of Meliora. And I heard someone say once, I don't like Meliora because there's too many covers on it, because they didn't realize that it was a separate EP because of how Spotify formats it, with it being all as one album. But going from this song into the first song of the EP, Square Hammer, it kind of, to me, ruins that kind of mournful ending of the album with such a vibe shift in a way. So always, if you've never listened to this album, make sure you're listening to the standard edition, I say, simply because it really does end on this kind of mournful, you know, the album's called The Pursuit of Something Better, but we're not there yet, you know, that I think perfectly closes this album.
Yeah, it does. And it's wild to think about most people, because I know people that have done that too, where the deluxe edition, that they equate Square Hammer with being part of this album when it's just not. It's Popestar, you know, and you know it being the only original song included on an EP in Ghost catalog, because every other EP is nothing but covers. I thought it was interesting that they did put that as an original track on there. And now that we have the 13 Commandments, I call it a mixtape because it's a compilation. Like I see anything that's released online as like, you know, big compilation, like, oh, it's a mixtape, bro. But now we have the 13 Commandments compilation with Zenith on there, which Zenith was actually included as part of the Meliora Redux box set that you could get a vinyl copy of the song Zenith on there. And
which I do own. Yeah.
And that for the longest time was and is, I think, still, if you're a collector, is such a holy grail piece, you know, to have. That the only way that a lot of us here in the States, you know, could listen to Zenith was on YouTube. And I remember discovering, you know, these tracks or whatever and thought, damn, man, you know, of the two songs, because obviously they left them off of the track listing for a reason. I think Meliora, as it stands, is perfect as is with the 10 tracks they selected. However, between Square Hammer and Zenith, I feel like Zenith fit the album vibe a lot more than Square Hammer did.
I agree. And I was talking to someone about this, and this is interesting to talk about, is because someone I was talking to on a Discord server disagreed and thought that Square Hammer was a much better fit. And actually, I think they argued it would be a better closer. And I strongly disagreed with that. I don't think Square Hammer, as great as it is, I love that song, it's too different. I don't think it fits very well. Whereas you could throw Zenith anywhere on this record, really, and it adds to it for me. It's a great, grandiose song that has Martin's print all over it. And it's so ominous. It's doomy, but not in the sense of doom metal, but I feel like there's an impending doom while hearing it, like a clock of doom, or like something's coming.
Yeah.
And it's not good, you know?
There's two spots that I would place this. Like if we were adding Zenith,
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, if we were adding Zenith into this record, because like to get to the point you were making earlier about the dude you were talking with in your Discord that disagreed, Square Hammer, and I'm just saying this right now, this is my opinion, and you can either like, hey, this is a valid take, or you can be like, hey, dude, fuck off. I don't think Square Hammer flows. I don't think it flows in the context of the song arrangements. It just does not. It's too different. Like you mentioned, it's too different. And there's nowhere that I could place this on this record, open or close, because it shouldn't open and it shouldn't close. There's nowhere in here it makes sense to go, like flat out. Now with Zenith, I feel like it could either go between Absolution and Deus in Absentia. Like it could literally be like a bridge piece between those two. Or it could come after Mummy Dust and go into Majesty.
Either of those places, I think it would work really well. I don't know. It's a song that is strong, and of the album, it fits with the album. It fits lyrically with the album. It fits thematically. It fits sonically. Yeah, I'm amazed that they left this off. Like I can see in some ways why. It's a long song. It's very theatrical, but it is a winner of a song. It's the way the fandom has adopted it and loved it kind of shows that it is a winner of a song.
Yeah. We definitely got treated when they finally released it to streaming services here in the United States. You know, when they put it out on that 13 Commandments compilation, I was fucking surprised.
Yeah. And all they have to do next for me would be to play it live.
Same.
You know, personally, I always doubt that that's going to happen just for so many reasons. Like there's so many songs you could fit on the set list before you would fit that one in. But now is a really good time. And with it being released, I would love to hear a live version of that with like the live backing vocals and everything.
Yes. Live keyboard, piano, live, everything. Just, yeah. I'm all about
that with big arena lights and everything.
That's it, dude. I'm all about hearing stuff with different, because like when you hear something live, you get to hear like the instruments being compressed differently. You get to hear tonal qualities that are different, that maybe like the drums are supposed to match certain album sounds live, but then you hear those sounds being used on other tracks. That's the fun part to hear.
Yeah, Ghost sounds like the record, but when you see them live, and I bring up live stuff a lot, but I love live performances as a musician, right? As we both do.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of those things where it's like on a record, you can do so much, but you can also play with so much. You can have different tunings. You can have different, multi-tracks. You can have layering things with acoustics and other things to make things sound thick. Live is completely honest, and it's the most, not to say that records aren't honest, but there's no room for error. So sometimes things have to be rechanged and rearranged and things, and seeing how bands interpret their tracks, how would we do this live, is really interesting to me always.
Yeah.
And this is one that I feel like would work well live and be really interesting to see live.
Yeah. And I think to close this conversation out, like I think these all work live extremely well. I mean, I think it's a testament to this album's longevity, as like we discussed at the beginning of the episode. These songs are still mostly being played in the set list live right now, which, I mean, we may get some changes up with this tour that's happening like soon, but if you are out there listening, is there a song that you like on this album that you think should be played live that hasn't been played live? Or are there songs on here where you're just like, they probably should never play this again? And furthermore, if you had to put Square Hammer and or Zenith on this record, tell us where you would place it in terms of sequential order.
I'd be curious to know that too. But yeah, like in closing, this album is phenomenal, and this era is phenomenal, and this is a really special landmark album for Ghost. It always will be. It'll always be special. Let's say we're talking 15 years down the line now, people will still be talking about Meliora. And when we talk about important rock records of the 2000s, I think people will always be talking about Meliora as well. It is a great album. It's a phenomenal album in every sense of the word. And it's special to Ghost, and it's special to rock music. and I love it.
And it was recorded 10 years ago in January, and as of this August, it will be the official 10th anniversary of Meliora.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And a perfect time to see Ghost on the Skeletor and hear some of these songs and celebrate this album and what it did for Ghost and how it brought so many of us here.
Your rating out of 5 on this one?
That's a hard one. All right. Is this a rating? I got to ask, is this personal or objective? Because there's 2 different ratings for that.
You can give both.
Okay. Objectively, 4.5 out of 5. I want to give it 5 out of 5. I really do, because I do think that objectively speaking, I think it's a perfect Ghost record. But for me, I have to give it a 4.5 out of 5 because it's hard for me to give everything a 5 out of 5. That's nearly impossible.
Yeah.
Personally, for me, I'm still going to give it probably a 4.
That's for me. It's like a 3.7. Like for personal, 3.75. Objectively, like 4.25. It's like
okay,
that kind
that's
of
fair.
Yeah, like 4.25, man. It's it is like it is the quintessential Ghost album to the casual listener. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I can't overlook that. I can't. My own feelings, everything. It's like, even if it's like, because honestly, if this album wasn't so overplayed for me, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, it's just that I've heard these songs more times than I could even begin to count. It's like my version. I'm a big Kiss fan. It's like my version of Destroyer. You know, it's like, it's one of those ones, like, it's just like, you know, there's always that album for every band where it's like, oh yeah, it's the Black Album, right? It's everyone's heard it and it's always all over the radio. It's always done. But there's a reason for that. It is exceptional and it perfectly sums up what Ghost is, what Ghost will always be. It's like we talked about with Year Zero, where it's everything you love from Ghost in one song. This is everything you love from Ghost in one album.
100%. And like we mentioned at the top of the episode, Meliora did win the United States Grammy for Best Metal Performance for Cerise, and to this day is the only Grammy-winning Ghost album for literally any category it was nominated for. And its subsequent albums have been nominated for Grammys, which I think, you know, they say it's cliche. Oh, to be nominated is an honor, but it fucking is an honor to be nominated, because that means you were considered to be good enough to sit amongst like greatness. You know what I'm saying? So
absolutely,
I think it's a testament to the songwriting of Tobias Forge and the people that he chooses to work alongside, that we keep constantly getting quality music. And I feel like Meliora was the tipping point to catapult Ghost further into the mainstream than they had been before, because it went from word of mouth to these motherfuckers are plastered everywhere now.
Yeah, it is an album that nothing before it was like it, and nothing after it will ever be the same. It changed the game for Ghost. It changed the game for their popularity, and until perhaps Mariana Cross got viral, it was the biggest blow-up point for them. And probably still in some ways is, because you probably never would have gotten to Mariana Cross without this. So all the props to this album. Great production, great musicianship, great songwriting, great album.
No notes.
Nope. Yeah. It's like literally it's one of those albums where it's like, I almost feel like there's not as much to say about it, because it's just, you couldn't put into words. It's just, you have to listen to it and be like, yeah, that's a great album.
Agreed. For past, present, and future episodes of GonstFM Off Air, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. You can leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. You can leave a rating or leave comments on individual episodes on Spotify. And if you're listening to this episode on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the channel, clicking the bell for notifications for future episodes, leave a like on the video, or leave a comment down below. Any engagement helps. If you'd like to follow us on any of our social media platforms, this can be found in the Linktree link in the show notes below. And so, our dearest Gonslings, that brings today's episode to a close. Some of you we will see in internet land, and the rest of you we will see in GonstFam. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember, until next time, in Gonst, we Tronst. I'm Papa X.
And I'm Uncle Ghoul.
And we'll catch you next time.